Good morning, brethren, sisters, and all degrees from any house in this organization. I welcome you again with much enthusiasm to the 8 Circuits of Consciousness, 8 lecture series. We are today enjoying consciousness on how it feels internally, cognitively, mentally, socially, hopefully, since we've been on this united us quest for knowledge. Um, it's been resonating with me much, and I'm just as excited to bring lecture 3 this morning as I was about lecture 2 and the first lecture. Lecture 1. Today we're going to talk again about how it relates to discordians. I suppose the tricky part is the location in which I'm going, or from which I'm going to give the lecture today. It isn't the indoor setting, is it? Unless, of course, you live in the Crystal Palace, then you know I'm sitting on the couch and looking out at about 2,500 Discordians. I love it. It's lovely. Uh, so the first 2 lectures were in the Commerce building, and there we had a lot of uh, interesting, I want to say, inflammation going on from just the others, I suppose, those are not members of Freemasonry. Um and that's got a lot to do with the propensing rate at which in the commercial field we tend to exhibit kind of sort of more more or less perform um, the um, the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite 33 degrees. It is one of those that is on the top of the list, if you will, uh, for all the right reasons. And as far as Freemasonry is concerned, that is as far as I'm concerned. I do know from the meetings I've attended or that I've to attend that the ancient, that the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, 33 degrees, um, it's influencing a lot of movements, and they are within the fraternity. Those that I'm interested in, I've learned to understand about. Um, so we're going to get into the lecture. I want to make a disclaimer, and also I want to formally introduce myself for those who are just getting in on the series. I'm Grandmaster Williams. I am a member of the New Discordian Society. It is in the Discordian Illuminati Brotherhood. Uh, yes, there are sisters in this organization, in the chapters. Um, I'm a manager of the New Discordian Society, and I'm a 5th degree Episcopos. So I thank Grandmaster Crowley for the opportunity to present this lecture series. Grandmaster Williams, I also extend appreciation to for the support and every other Grandmaster, each Grandmaster here, and everybody, no matter what degree you are. No, and I don't say that to be mean. I mean, it is not as important as me recognizing on the level each and every brother or sister in the fraternity as me brother or my sister as well. And so, a disclaimer: I'm not speaking on behalf of Freemasonry, right? So this is an art to represent the fraternity. This is my opinion, and that's what it's based on. Uh, so let's get into lecture three, shall we? The lecture that we are getting into now is the Third Circuit of Consciousness lecture. And so it's labeled as the Symbolic Circuit. Wow, what interesting. You know, I don't go into much preparation before the lecture on the day of, right? I literally put together the lectures, and after that, I pretty much went out empirically throughout my own community and started an academic investigation to correlate what I read or came up with, found or researched um, in real time, from just place to place, one at a time, not looking for a mass population or the entire public square or anything of that nature. Um, so I spent a lot of empirical time in an academic investigation. I usually do. I want to make sure that what is printed on paper is exactly the way people or persons act in reality. We can always become an artist. I'm an artist as well, so you know, I'm not fooled by it. And on the university campuses and colleges, when it comes to resources and to citing works, to putting papers together, not every web address or site for resources is acceptable either, right? So when we for example we go to .com, nobody's going to really want .com at turned in as an instructor in college because it's not reliable enough. It's always being added to, right? And so we can't rely on it on the 1.0% $1 acquisition rate. We can't rely on something that's less than 1% in its proficiency rate, if you will, to propend or expand or explore, to be more profound. It was here to the lexicon this morning. Um, so the most reliable ones. We'll get around this. Which ones aren't? We'll eliminate the ones that are, or expose them, leave them revealed, if you will. .edu, .gov. Those are most. These are top of the line. And so when I do research, I also go into an academic investigation about what I found to make sure people are really correlating that way, to make sure people really feel cognitive in the morning, to make sure Discordians really feel the discord and the harmony in the fraternity. So the symbolic circuit, I have not rehearsed or went over it since I prepared it this morning, right? And that's because I want to make sure when I'm learning, I don't turn into a bot and just become an information dispenser, metaphorically. But I continue to be refreshed and refined in the information as a human being, my own self. So I usually put together the lecture and I totally leave it alone until the day of. I don't go over it and debrief it or anything. And so that's the reason that it's interesting to me that today, when it is the day of, the third circuit we are about to talk about is the symbolic circuit. And that's because we talk a lot, we use that word symbolism a lot in the fraternity. Um, and it's always one of those pardoned words, symbolism. Yeah, some words we use a lot, and often they end up needing correction or an alternative, possibly. But all of it is to the good of the order, and it is all in trial and error. And so, you know, I've no opposition stance to take. The symbolic circuit has its consternation with logic and symbolic thought. Now, I can get really good with this one because we're talking about symbolism. Now, in the first lecture, on the first circuit, we talked about the biosurvival circuit, and lots of that is pretty sublime and it's really internal. And then the second lecture was on the emotional circuit, obviously really internal. And here we are on the symbolic circuit, and we can start to delve or dive into philosophy now, because we already know how we examine or evaluate knowledges when we are doing it with the framework of Masonic principles platform underneath us, right? When we're looking into things, we are talking about the symbolic meaning of them in terms of the working tools of uh, Freemasonry, right? Symbolism, really big. And so the consternation of the lecture, not the lecture, the circuit, which is the symbolic circuit, is with logic and symbolic thought. And what we're going to do with logic and what we're going to do with symbolic thought. Maybe with logic, we're going to put all of the bits and pieces, the Lego blocks, metaphor, together, things that fit, that are just strategically taken apart or disassembled, right? And will be reassembled once the purpose for disassembling is fulfilled, right? It's possible. I'm not sure we want to try that with, say, a boiled egg. If we take the shell apart and eat the egg side, but I'm not sure we're gonna put the shell back together. But there's a large world out here in Freemasonry, and lots of very popular and famous and very skilled and talented, gifted, mystic types of individuals have um, crossed the gates and into the fraternity once upon a time along this Masonic journey. And so maybe some of them have existed, or passed on to the Grand Lodge up above today, or something, or are still alive and living and well and are performing such miraculous things, like putting egg back together afterwards, a boiled egg, right? So we're not want to shut it down at all, um, because that's just the logic part of the third circuit. Remember, the other part of its consternation with logic is symbolic thought. So when it comes to symbolic thought, which is on the other side of it, right, or next to it, I, I would not want to have cast out the idea of the possibility that somebody in this world, somebody in Freemasonry, whose profession is doing that type of thing, um, can, you know, boil an egg, take the egg shell apart, eat the egg yolk, eat the egg white, and put the shell back together again. I won't shut out the possibility. I've never seen it done, but I won't shut it out because logic is one part of me thinking about it in thoughts of it. I'm in logic, but then on the other side of it, I'm symbolic thought because I can always look at in a symbolic way how very well my own self could take an eggshell that's broken and put it back together, right? You can take a hard-boiled egg, remove the shell from it, peel it apart, have the egg white, have the egg yolk as well, and put the shell back together in a symbolic way. And that's what's interesting to me and exciting when today it's to me as well to venture along the philosophy of Masonry, the Masonic philosophies, when we're talking about, the general circuits of consciousness, which apply to us all. But we're doing it. We are going beyond traditional education in this society to talk about those consciousness circuits. or those little brains, and it is absolutely fascinating already. The way it takes thought and the way it takes esotericism and makes shape of it, in my opinion, right? And so, if you're familiar with hominids, then we're going to talk a little bit about hominids. If you're familiar with primates, we're going to talk a little bit about primates as well. All right? Hominids, well, includes all the great apes, including humans, right? And hominids are of a taxonomic family of primates, right? What are primates then? Because these hominids are of a taxonomic family of primates. It's where the hominids come from. So what are the primates? To understand where the hominids, you know, tend to fall, if you will, no pun intended, along the lines of the third circuit of consciousness, right? So we can understand how this relates to discordians, right? So we do understand that this uh, culture or class or category includes all the great apes, including humans, and are of a taxonomic family of primates. So what primates? Primates is an order of um, mammals, right? Which we are, right? Um, Primates arose from 85 to 55 million years ago, first, right? From small terrestrial animals, which adapted for life in tropical forests. So, the way I like to think about this is the primates among in the forest, tropical, not going without food, not going without water. There's plenty of moisture in the vines that swing or hang in a tropical forest, from what I've seen. Um, Probably a lots of wild berries and fruits and other things that maybe even we have today in a grocery store somewhere. Um, and I'm not sure if it might be in the United States, North America, or some other country, but it is possible that there are some of those foods that might be in the tropical forest, possibly in the grocery store, right? Or if not in a grocery store, in like the rural towns in the world, where there are farms and large fields and crops and harvests going on season to season, or year to year rather, that might be things that they take and have a special family recipe, for example, to prepare some family traditional dish, right? That maybe is just going to be prepared once a year during those favorite and special holidays, right? So in the tropical forest, I tend to imagine that the primates are healthy. They have um, they have the ability and the will to care for themselves. The hominids, a combination between the apes and the humans, right? And so hominids, well, are those apes, humans, us, right? And each of us are from altogether primates. They have adapted to tropical forests, um, from small terrestrial animals, and arose 85 to 55 million years ago first. Now, this is the third dimension, a dimension that adds the effect of solidity to a two-dimensional system, right? And another description of the third dimension, you might find important is that it's a quality that confers reality or likeness, right? So that's sorts of logic, remembering the concatenation of the third circuit. Um, Circuit 3 introduces the third dimension, right? Left and right related to the development of dexterous movement and handling artifacts, right? So this starts to feel like um, the uh, the general evaluation of knowledges, starting to use critical thinking skills or critical thinking energy. The inert starts to come to mind as we go on through this third circuit in a philosophical context, because it is the symbolic circuit. Artifacts or an artifact is an object made by a human being, typically an item of cultural or historical interest. So this means it is a trace of something. It's meant to be when it is made, and we want to talk about craftsmanship when we talk about it being made and for this purpose, or in this type of way, right? As a cultural or historical interest. That's philosophical. So perhaps I'm not saying I'm knowing for a fact, because this is my opinion. Again, it's based on my opinion, and then it's also based on academic investigation in the fraternity from course to course that I enrolled in and have taken up. Um, this cultural or historical interest is definitely within the bounds of symbolism where Freemasonry concerns itself, right? We all about the working tools in a symbolic way when we are encouraging proficiency about the tools, knowledge about the tools in the first place, right? So, no surprise to me that an object made by a human being, right, is typically an item of cultural or historical interest. I mean, in our age, this is all I'm aware of anyway. When it comes to artifacts, I actually think uh, I think that's pretty unique to have that interest and have the interest categorized, and it's not just general, it's not just intuitive, right? It is a historical interest. It's also typically also as well cultural interest, uh, in which the manner of these things have been created, right? That are labeled as an artifact, not a souvenir, a collectible, right? An antique or whatever. But when it's an artifact, so we're learning that artifacts, particularly, are sorts of landmarks or what we call them. I think landmarks is the right word, but they are like markers when we just think about Asian culture, and let's take wedding for example. When there are two of them, and of course this has been adapted um, um, in North America as well, of course. Um, After a wedding, there's the rice throwing, right? And then you can see that neither bride nor groom will ever turn around to retrieve the rice, right? So it's pretty ritualistic, and this type of manner in which objects are made that turn out to be artifacts are sort of being in a symbolic way created along the journey in life. And since they are created typically with cultural or and historical interest, itemized wise, it seems as we are moving forward ever backward, never that we want to create things that we can always take a trip or visit, right, back into the past or to history and not lose, round trip our trace or our pace or our purpose or objective, if we've any objective, because we've built these things going forward in a way that they are going to have a resemblance or significance when we get into the mode of research or empirical uh, research. When we are ethnographic about it, we've got these markers set up when we make the return, right? We can do whatever it is we want to do, right? Learn, and then when it's time to get back where we left off from, we don't bring back right what is already there in place, having already created things that all sorts of guides for us while we are journeying, right? And so let's look at sort of a circle which we don't have a beginning or an ending point of or two. A primate, right? The primate enclosed in a circle, right? Or circle. Um, let's look at here a diagram that just might help us, understand a little better while we are just verbally talking about it. This is what came up with. I'm going to fetch a little instrument to facilitate this particular portion of the segment. Let's think of the primate here in the circle, and in the tropical forest, this primate is going to be in the circle, right? While, in other words, in the tropical forest, in its habitat, its environment, its territory, it's got this philosophical circle around it, if you will, right? It's just symbolic here on the page as it is a circle. It's symbolic, right? And this is what the highlight is sorts of kind of shedding some illumination for, right? To be distinct about what these illustrations are, as well as the graphic construction, if you will, of them, the way they're composed. And this is the reason, or that's the reason why this little apple is there, because we want to make sure that in the primates we remember the hominids, and which includes all the apes and the humans. So we've got a little fruit there in this circle, right? It's a temporary or symbolic thing, as a result of the symbolic apple there, which we are very familiar with in this society, right? Uh, and from the primate, giving the whole course of life, practical day to day life, we get to spiritual development, right? Or growth, if that's a more comfortable vocabulary word, right? Or into the hominids from the primates. From the primates, we'll get to the hominids, and we get spiritual development or growth, right? We also get to commonwealth over the years, right? In humanity. So when we're talking about artifacts, right? How it is that we can go into, we can grow, and how we get to commonwealth, and if we ever want to, in terms of spiritual development, sort of journey back into history, where we've already created artifacts that are going to help us highlight or illuminate our path, right? And so the primate, you know, is when the primates is when so this is conditional here, when the hominid separates from the primate, right, the third dimension is introduced, right? When the hominid separates from the primate, which has been already, right, the third dimension is introduced. It's just introduced. We've not gotten all the way in to the fourth dimension, right? Um, we're beyond the first dimension, right? But it's only been introduced, right? So, left and right related to the development of dexterous movement and handling artifacts. When the hominid separates, which we know has happened, from the primate, the third dimension is introduced. Left and right related to the development of dexterous movement and handling artifacts. That's intelligence. That has to do with intelligence. Let me put my little instrument back in its correct holster. That is intelligence, right? So, not hard to accept our course in nature history as mammals. We've separated, and the natural course is availed things that we've adapted over time, and we've categorized how it impacts us or others, and there's no way around that anyway, right? Nobody's in control of life, right? So dexterous movement becomes something unique, right? A dexterous movement is a small motion, right? A small motion, right? In coordination with the or of small muscles in movement with the eyes, hands, and fingers. So things that you want to look at. Have you ever noticed the superstar wrestler, commercial wrestling WWF league, not WCW, Macho Man Randy Savage? He has this type of finger thing he does, like, ooh yeah. Have you ever familiar with that? Uh, it reminds me of that because it's got he does this look cosmic thing like, yeah, brother, yeah. And so maybe that's not the best example. We don't know. No, others have been proposed yet. So, uh, but that is what brings to my mind. And so, a small motion in coordination with the or of small muscles, with the small muscles or of the small muscles in movement with the eyes, hands, and fingers. So when you're using those hands and fingers, which with this you're doing those all two of the three already, and you use the eyes as well, right? Um, with those small muscles in movement, you've got what's dexterous movement. Now in martial arts, again, I'm a martial arts student. We learn a lot about dexterity and bones and why it's important to do Tai Chi, practice Tai Chi. Just do it, but practice Tai Chi, practice yoga, practice Qigong, and other martial arts, right? Disciplines. Uh, and so I get it. There's these small motions, and this is a part of the yin and the yang, where you've got the yin on one hand, and then you've got the yang on one hand. And we know in this society that something similar, the cow, excuse me, it's spelled with so that it looks like you might want to pronounce it as chow. You might want to pronounce the H, but the H is silent. It's CHAO, but it's pronounced cow. What it is the singular form of chaos. Chaos is meant, in other words, than to be in this context. massive and plurality, right? Whereas cow is singularity in the same respect. And that emblem that represents cow in the New Discordian society is identical to the yin yang, with just a little bit of creativity with what are in the places where on the yin yang there are just circles. I don't know right off the top of my head what those images are, but maybe one of them is the five pointed star, and the other is the pentagon or something. I'm not sure about the 5 point star. Maybe it's the apple of Discord. But there are things that relate to or that symbolize this society, this organization, House of Eris, Hell Eris, in the place where in martial arts in the yin yang, there's the circle on the white and the yin, there's the black circle, and in the black and the yang, there's the white circle. But yin yang goes in the way that we would practice Tai Chi. We'd be looking at the slow motion. So when you're doing Tai Chi and you're moving like this, or let's say you're moving like this, well, good one where I'm in the position I'm in is when we're moving like this with the fist going up, right? What's happening here is on the bottom, the left palm. It's the same for this art. It's always the left palm is exposed, right? The fingers are together, right, like this on the left hand, and it's going to catch the right hand, right? We're going to place the fist into the left hand, right, to the palm, but we're going to raise the fist up very slowly first, along with the right leg, up to a bend the knee, up to the waist, and that's his yin. It's the slow motion, the slow movement, and then we bring it down really fast. You can hear it make a smack, and that's the yang. And you see this in martial arts often when you've got the yin and the yang right there in front of you, where we go up like this. This is the yin, and then we're going down like this, and that's just the yang. And the idea of yin yang is to balance the energies, right? And to continue to balance them, to practice it all the time. So you're learning slowly how to develop muscle memory, because after a while the muscles are going to know exactly how to do the movement, or how and or in what place the body should be in order to perform martial arts. And then you do the fast to remember in real time the impact that martial arts is capable of producing, right? In the physical body. So dexterous movement, yes, I connect with that. Dexterous movement, it's in the concept of yin yang, and I can see it relevant to us in Discordianism, because of the emblem of the symbol, symbolic cow symbol. Um, it can be related with the nervous system, right? Sure, can be related with the nervous system. An example number one of three examples I would share: operating a motor vehicle. We can find ourselves in dexterous movement because we've got to stay aware whether the vehicle's in motion very fast, or if the vehicle's in motion because it's vibrating when we're sitting in park or at a red light, right? Or a stop sign, an intersection. Um, it's still moving. It's not always got to move forward or backward. It can also move up or down, or it can move all around and just jitter, right? Another example is operating levered machinery, something that it requires manual labor to grab a lever to pull, similar to an automatic transmission vehicle where you've got to pull, or a standard transmission like a 5 speed, a stick shift, in other words, where you've got to continuously handle more than just the comfort of riding and based on accuracy and your ability to steer. You also got to work the clutch on the manual transmission vehicle, right? But you don't get to escape this even if you're using an automatic transmission. You've always still got a point where you've got to put the gear into park or into drive or into reverse, into neutral, take it out of neutral, out of park, out of drive, out of reverse, into the other. I get it. So expertness is important. And I see that we embrace this in the Freemasonry because we are into the symbolic meaning of those working tools, right? And very much so, we are therefore in one dimension we are very logical, and in another dimension we're very symbolic in thought. So what do we do with what we think about is always to be announced TBA, if you will. But it's definitely not something with that we can telepath, right? No one's able to telepath our gentle craft, right? Um, not bathing, not eating, not sleeping, or dressing, or talking, etc. These are things that where it is or can be related with the nervous system. We might experience these things, or one of them, right? Or a couple of them, some of them, if not all of them, at least one, because the dexterity of our bone, we have to keep those in a certain condition. And if we don't, with age, which happens naturally, this kind of loss of dexterity, uh, we are we are unable physically to care for ourselves. Realistically, we don't get to bathe when we really wish we could, but we don't take care of our bones. We've not got as much dexterity in there, even as much as we would have with the little bit, with a lot of age in this world and life. Um, you know, if we were working out, exercising, and staying in shape and conditioning our bones, I mean, faithfully, we're still going to go without as we age. But definitely, if we don't do that, that working out conditioning part of it, when we do get to that age where it's just so hard to move around and it's much easier to think about things, we're going to start to experience misery because we can't bathe ourselves. We can't get up to go into a kitchen and get something to drink or even an item to eat because our bones are just so stiff, our joints are so painful because we've not conditioned ourselves. It's the dexterity, right? So when hominids separated from the primates, the third circuit began to appear. The symbolic circuit became, you know, started to appear, began, was introduced, emerged, right? Um, being a symbolic circuit, right? And when this is when also the biosurvival mode, not the circuit from first lecture, but the biosurvival mode begins to exist three-dimensionally, right? In regard to consciousness. Now, there's the first circuit is the biosurvival mode. It concerns itself. Excuse me. It's the biosurvival circuit, which concerns itself with survival mode or horde mode, right? And it is a one-dimensional perception that's a forward-backward thing. So we're thinking very consciously. It's just a sensory motor kind of function, right, of cognition in the first place. In other words, essentially, it's not just of an adult age that someone's experiencing it in human life. It is first activated in an infant's mind, right? And so consciousness is a big deal. When the hominids separated from the primates, the third circuit, the symbolic circuit, it began to appear, being a symbolic circuit, right? When the biosurvival mode began to exist in the third dimension, which is in the third circuit, the symbolic circuit. Reason why is because of consciousness and the human in the first circuit, which we learned about all the way to relevancy as an infant, right? And so what's happened here in a vaguer term or more generalized way is hominids or primates evolved into hominids and separated economical reasons or ways of life, or norms or values, you name it, for the reason might have been, and had to start to use the symbolic circuit of consciousness. Had to start to, in other words, a couple of things, in my opinion. Um, Number one, improvise, right? And number two, um, think, right? We had to make sort of compensate for what we had uh, on our end, which once was all in one, when separating, knowing we've what we had still now as if we've never worked on it before, because it was always in a combination. It was not in our own agency, right? So now we've a need for symbolic thought because we've a need to buy ourselves time or to go about some type of consideration or contemplation, um, some thought as to what we're going to do with what we no longer have 50% of another entity as well managing with us or maintaining with us. We've still got to manage it. Not sure which one you want to choose, manage or maintain. They're not the same though, in my opinion. We'll say that much. um, but we had to start to use the symbolic circuits when hominids separated from primates, right? The hominids had to make do with what is all there is for a hominid, in this life, in this world, on this planet, in this universe, each individual one, and realize that that is not the same as the entire class, if you will, when also not yet separated into its own symbolic thoughts or its own use of logic, right? So now, instead of a hive, whenever you have a hive with somebody, you 50% in, you're not 100% in, you 50% in, and they 50% in. Let's say, for example, we're talking a duo or a dyad, a group of two. When that group separates, right, and there's only a single now, one. So the 50% you contributed, you've got to retract. And it's not 50% anymore. You're back with your 100%. What you've learned in the experience of the share is now what you've got to bear since you're independent or individual again. You've got to make sense of what you picked up or learned from somebody else during a combination or collaboration. If you're to separate, right? You don't start back where you started at in learning, in life, in nature, in terms of with regard to survival mode or the bio-survival circuit by it, according to Leary's model of the eight circuits of consciousness. You do not go backwards in the world. Nobody ever can go in reverse. So what you ever invest, when you ever start over or it's over with, your investment's done. You've got to deal with the advances that you've earned upon your own self equity, your own health equity, right? Whatever equity it might be. And so what's happening is hominids are becoming more aware of essentials living things need in order to grow, how to handle certain things, particularly artifacts, becomes more critical, right? Logic has to exist among primates as well as the artifacts hominids discover, right? Explaining the process in a biological and organic context, influencing the semantic circuit by Leary. Dexterity or dexterous movement accounts for transition appropriately, becoming conscious worth methodology, right? It accounts for transition, seamless, right? Uh, Appropriately, becoming conscious worth methodology. all right, or agility. Okay, when you got dexterous movement, and transitions are bound to happen. It's inevitable, right? You can find yourself becoming conscious worth or conscious wise methodological, right? Or maybe another word we might use here, um, besides agile, um, handy, crafty, innovative, right? But ready to interpret the experience to the positive, ready to desensitize it if it seems or appears first as a negative or a threat, right? Ready to make it where it is that you're destined to be or where you have in mind as a goal to be, no matter what challenges come up and what they look like or how you identify with them, right? So, what is being thought of symbolism intrinsically motivates one to take fortitude in dexterous movement, right? Symbolic interactionism is a word for it. It's a sociology field term. It's the way that we in society at large um, communicate because we've created symbols and with objects that symbolize things once we spoke verbally, right? Old Glory, um, our national banner, is probably one of the examples that has been used before, popular ones or common ones. Um, it's symbolic, and when we're in an environment where it is hoisted, whether it's hoisted all the way to the top or it's hoisted to half staff, there are different reasons, and it communicates to us what the agenda is, so to speak, or the occasion. And people, persons, us in society, we govern our manners based on it. Our um, we govern our uh, we govern our what's the word? No, I can't speak it. Um, our intuitions, our inquisitions, our expertness. We hone on it. We so tweak it and adjust it to whatever that is in your own respective our own respective communities that has been decided as a provision to conduct or carry out, provide to the community in light of the occasion, right? Symbolic interactionism is about our nonverbal communication, and it's facilitated by artifacts or symbolic objects, structures, things by which we express our circuitry or our brain concerning communicated messages. These are chemical and electrical signals in the brain that make the reality of consciousness uh, when we are in exchange of information, right? And not we're just learning or we're bottling information up and we're sitting spongiously holding it all in. This happens when we're exchanging information, consciousness. And so concerning those communicated messages, often relating the nervous system. There it is, right? So in the symbolic circuit, four things I want to share. The first one is the mind takes the role of symbolic thought. That's philosophy, Masonic philosophy. The mind in the symbolic circuit takes the role, takes the role of symbolic thought, right? Number two, dexterous movement becomes essential and a sufficient condition. We need it when we are in the symbolic circuit because we're going in a we are logic and symbolic thought concerned in or according to Leary's model of the eight circuits of consciousness during the third circuit, the symbolic circuit, right? Um, the 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 fourth thing is that the horde mode or survival mode becomes a way of lifestyle behavior. And our lifestyle behavior, generally, in terms of concepts of positive living, or maybe we'll call it, what would we call this? This is a good way to look at health and stress management. We are influencing, pretty much determining what our health behavior is by our lifestyle behavior, right? And it goes chronologically, they don't reciprocate. The lifestyle behavior sort of creates the pace, sets the pace for our health behavior, right? And so the horde mode becomes a way of lifestyle behavior. The hominids will know this. The primates will remember this and are aware of this. And that does not eliminate the hominids. It does not eliminate the hominids in terms of the biosurvival circuit, consciousness, right? Um, Let me get me instruments again to share with you yet another illustration, sorts of a graph. This is what I do. I create illustrations sometimes to enhance my learning experience. So let's take a look here at this beautiful graph here, because of what it's about, not me. And here we are, similar to where we went with the primates early on. But now the hominid is in the circle, right? And we don't have the little fruit there like we have with the primates, right, early on in the lecture. But that's because now we're in the hominids, and the hominids are, um, well, for one, the hominids includes humans as well as all the apes. And we know as humans, we are the most, we are the most of reason species that exist on the planet Earth, right? And so the hominids have this circle around them. It's a symbolic circle, right? And from this position or disposition, if you will, this stance or this perspective of the hominids, we know that we can get into the personality, right? And we can also get into the character, right? And each of them boils down intelligence, right? They boil down intelligence. And when we are in intelligence, via personality, via character, right? As a result of consciousness, we can always find in the symbolic thought those branches that are the eight circuits of consciousness, right? Now, it might seem a little intimidating when we look at illustrations of things that we get the freedom to just speak and change the context to, and change the intensity, to change the pitch, or change the perplexity, and just totally make art of communication. But when we accept it in a symbolic thought, or accept it in a logical way, these are things that are meant for us to enjoy in the intrinsic manner. We need not to make them creative or to manipulate them. These things are already a part of us. They are part of the way we have become over time, millions of years of work. Obviously, if you ask me, should afford us the eight circuits of consciousness without having to work hard, without having to stress ourselves, without having to feel it's a job in order to be conscious, right? It's natural. And so, theory here, brethren and sisters, fellow Discordians, we are experiencing a more profound exploration of the meaning of the craft taking place among the developmental points of the circuits, which we have not gotten into yet, um, at least through Leary's model of the eight circuits of consciousness, where each circuit has three stages that detail the developmental points of each circuit. Well, not each circuit does not have three stages. each trio or triad, um, detailing the developmental points of circuits that are not the one under which it is, as we would look at it on an illustration, right? They explain, each circuit is explained by its own sets of three stages, right? So we cannot share the significance of the circuits without logic because we're living beings, not just existing, we're living beings. And it is impossible to eliminate all stress, which proves we are living beings. We get stressed out. We also use a lot of stress when we're very happy about it. Eustress is what it's called, the positive kind. And the distress is the negative kind. We get distress feelings going on when we lose a loved one or break a bone, something that we just don't imagine happens. It tends in Western civilization to be a legitimate point of distress, right? And then on the other hand, if we go to our North American or Western civilization sports arenas, and on a voluntary way, might I add, we are experiencing a stress there as well. The crowd is going wild. Also, the athletes that are playing and competing, all as well, going very wild, using a lot of dexterous movement, aren't they? And that as well is a stress. Or the birthday party we're celebrating, we're also using stress, but it's a happy way, right? So what do we do with this? How we get around it? That's where logic comes in at. That's where the third circuit comes in at. It teaches us about a little history and how it is that we've come to be able to maneuver around. This is what the essence of a dexterous movement is. We'll be able to move around, and it's not right there at the surface. It's where it's taught in martial arts schools later on, just as is our historical journey to 85 to 55 million years ago, right? So this is a long-term thing, this dexterous movement and the importance of it. It's not that you need it right there when you start to practice it. It's something that is already just happening in the physiological body, the physical world, in the physical world. We're always using it, and we're always impacting others and influencing positive action. We're in places we are probably not always aware of, right? And that's because of symbolic interactionism, and it is born of symbolic thought, right? And logic in the symbolic circuit, right? So distress and eustress, thus homeostasis, which is the balance of all stress. That's between the distress and the eustress. The oh no, man, I can't stand it, and the oh yeah, I wish you would hit him again. You know, if you were watching what I was watching just last evening, the fights of De La Hoya and Mayweather. There were some points in me thought process of what I was thinking, you getting it, you know, or wait a minute, don't yet, you know. And so these are um, these are the stresses that have this middle area where we're just pretty smooth and calm, very solemn, and humble feeling, and that's homeostasis, right? And so it's ideal, right? The homeostasis plate, if you will, is ideal balance for us. Um, Needing stress to survive, right? Um, which complicates our perceived third dimension, in my opinion, right? It complicates our um, our the perceived third dimension, right? When we are either it is safe or it isn't, either it is harmful or it's safe, or either I'm going to need here to swell my body size to appear to be dominant, right? Or I'm going to use the tail between the legs, submissive stance instead, right? Um, So it's leaving us to one dimension, the one dimension perception. In the first circuit, we talked about it, and that is where we individually might be concerned in what it is that we're perceiving. That's the biosurvival circuit again. So now we understand how a human moves on without having much to means or to move by, as it might concern inquisition or thoughts or retrospect or perspective without feeling lost for balance or harmony or order or organization, right? How a human moves on, moves forward, not backward. We're now understanding how. And in the sociology field, how, and when we ask questions, there are four sociology questions to ask. One of them is the factual question, and it is starting with the word what. What is it? This is taught and instructed and pointed out because those who aren't really truly into the field have this idea that the term sociology refers automatically and instantly, virtually, if frankly, to social work. Right? They're just remembering the way the pronunciation sounds, not much about the clinical or practical, even in terms of philosophy use of those words. Um, and so, in sociology, there are four questions to ask, and none of them are dealing with social work. Thus, these are dealing with research. This is what sociologists are into. Uh, what is the question? What is it? It's a factual question. The second one is where. It's a comparative question, which is where else is it? Okay, we know what it is. That's the first question, but where else is it? So we can compare the rates of it. How how much of it is here than there? And how much more important is it that it's in one place and not the other at the same rate, right? And the third one is how. It is a developmental question. We want to know, now that we know what it is and where it is, how did it come about? That's to talk it out, perhaps in a procedural way, to have a step process, right? As to how, with with the developmental question. How is it? How does it happen? And a lot of people think how is also asking why. How do you get there? Well, by riding the bus or taking a cab, right? That's how I got here. I'm with parents. But that's not what we're asking for when we're in sociology. In sociology, for experts, when we ask how, we want you to tell us how it began, how it evolved, from the ground up, like human life is from the mother's womb, or from the first conception of the male sperm, right, in the mother's womb, right. We want to talk about, like we humans would like, when we talk about, or someone's going to take a shot at describing us for our own self. Start out with me from the very beginning. You must start with me, father. You must start with me, mother. If you are going to talk about me and somehow convince me that you truly are accurate about me, you've got to start developmentally, and that is to me, parents, right? So the other question is the theoretical question. It starts with why. And that's what people mistake about the developmental question, how. They think how is asking why. Why is a separate question in sociology. Now that we know what it is, where else it is besides here, how it has come about, we want to know why it's come about now. And that's the theory point, right? What your take on it is. So much of the symbolic circuit, I would like to say, has a lot to do with your own perception. You've got to, with two ways we can communicate, verbal and nonverbal. And when we're nonverbal and we're using symbolism, you've got to be very interested in what you're trying to communicate more so because you've not the human ear to rely on. The human is relying on the human eye, the dexterous movement. When you're being nonverbal, you're being more kinetic. You're using gesture more, and so the nervous system comes to play in by the role of the mind, uh, due to its need to be conscious, to be someone you want to talk to, someone that you feel will listen, can hear you, not ignore you, avoid you, reject you, turn you away, to carry on an intellectual, adult level, mature conversational discussion, or even a debate with, right? And so this is what it was going to wrap us up with the third lecture of the eight lecture series on the eight circus